Hosni Mubarak is a free man. The former Egyptian president has returned home after 6 years in detention, 6 years after mass protests forced him out during a series of uprisings what became known as the Arab Spring. His release serves as a reminder of many subsequent uprisings from Yemen to Syria that failed or turned into civil wars. What does Mubarak's freedom mean now for Egyptians? How have the country and the region changed 6 years later? Joining me now in Toronto, Mohamed El Rashidy is a civil liberties and human rights lawyer and legal advisor to the Canadian Arab Federation. I'm very glad you were able to join us. I want to ask you first, surely the fall of Mubarak was really the most resounding moment of the Arab Spring. Now, does his freedom, does his release to you seem like a resounding end to the Arab Spring?
Thank you for having me, Terry. I definitely agree that the removal of Hosni Mubarak was a pinnacle of the achievements of the youth who led the Arab Spring. His release today, or his release and subsequent removal of all the charges against him and having him go home as a free man undoubtedly has been met with a variety of reactions across the country and across the region. Egypt is very divided. I would say, across the spectrum, you have people who are outraged. And you have all the way to people who still support him, although that is a small group of people. I think the reality, Terry, is that people are distracted to a very large extent in Egypt and neighboring countries, certainly in the case of Egypt because of the economic downturn that has taken over the country since the revolution, particularly inflation. So people's priorities are obviously food, and the price of food alone in 2017 is up over 40%. So as sad as this may sound, people are too distracted to care about the sacrifices from the revolution and are really busy trying to make ends meet on a daily basis.
So they're more concerned about bread than freedom right now, you think?
Absolutely. And the revolution slogan, Terry, was, ironically, was bread, freedom, and social justice. And when the first point of it, bread, is now scarce or extremely expensive, you can see where people's focus has gone to.
What does it say about the future of Egypt, do you think, 6 years on from the uprising in Tahrir Square? I mean, are we heading for another 30 years of military dictatorship just like Mubarak's?
Terry, you can look at this both ways. You can look at this as from the perspective of transitional justice is absolutely necessary after a revolution, and that the judiciary in Egypt has let down the revolution, and that it is absolutely not independent of the government. If the judiciary is independent, it's independent of justice in Egypt. But to put a positive spin on things, you could look at this and say, look, you had a dictator for over 30 years grooming his son, Jamal Mubarak, to lead the country. You have humiliated him and his kids. He served about 6 years, albeit mostly in a hospital bed. His children have also served jail time. So have the upper echelons of the regime, although all have been released. And therefore, you have derailed this inheritance by the son concept that was developing in Egypt, and you have overthrown the ruler. But you're absolutely correct. Nobody can say that the military has lost control of the country at any point prior to the revolution or after.
Canada tried to pitch in, right? Canada promised 11 million or so after dollars over 5 years. That was. It was not a huge amount of money back in 2011 to help Egypt with democratic reform and youth job training, journalistic development, all that good stuff. We didn't get our money's worth, did we?
No, I think this type of thing is helpful, and I think we should do more of it. I think 11 million is a very small amount, albeit it's better than nothing. But you can definitely get something in return when you tie it to economic development and use it on the levers that the Egyptian government is sensitive to. They're sensitive to international pressure. There's an energy crisis in Egypt now. Sure, there's an energy crisis in Egypt now. Egypt has gone from a net energy exporter to a net energy importer. So Canada can play a large role here economically and get results that way, I believe.
Now, what a final quick question, if I may, and that is about the region as a whole. As Egypt, of course, is the most central, most important nation in the Arab world in terms of its huge population. Other than Tunisia, the Arab Spring hasn't really worked anywhere, has it?
Well, it really depends on where you set the bar. If you set the bar low, then obviously it has not been very successful. There wasn't that democratic sweep of the area. But you're correct in that Egypt is over 90 million people, and a region, Arab world, is about 22 countries. So they are very influential. But Tunisia has been definitely a success by most accounts. I think when you look across, you realize that this type of change is going to take sacrifices by generations. And given the demographics and that the youth are behind this, and the majority of the people in the region are very young, you're hopeful that change is coming and that every government will now be very weary of the consequences of not giving something back to the people, as governments in the past have been very used to just brutal oppression with absolutely no hope for its population.
It's a very useful summary, and I thank you for taking the time. Thank you to Mohamed El Rashidy in Toronto tonight. Thanks.
Anytime. Thank you, Terry.
Thank you. Still ahead, it's been 1 year since the terrorist attacks in Belgium.